All these new challenges are bringing together about the biggest restructuring we have ever seen, not just of the global economy, but of the global order as a whole. And 200 years ago, a famous British Foreign Secretary said that the new world had been called into existence to redress the balance of the old. In 1990, another old world ended, dominated by the Cold War, and people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. What they actually meant then was a new political order. And what was not foreseen then, but is obvious now from everything that we see and do, what we experience in every day of our life, is the sheer scale and speed and scope of globalization. And it's only now that we can begin to understand that the world order that globalization brings and what it's going to look like, it's driven forward now not just by the balance of military strength, the Cold War times, or ordinary political power. It's being driven forward by a seismic shift in economic power that we see around us. But what does the New World Order mean for countries like ours who are looking to succeed? I suggest that the countries that are going to succeed are those that combine flexibility, free trade, open markets, with proper stewardship of the environment and investment in education, infrastructure and innovation. And the question for us is how we meet and master all these challenges to ensure that Britain enhances its competitiveness in the process and realizes what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future. There is an anti-change group, there's an anti-reform group, there's an anti-science group, there's a flat earth group, if I may say so, over the evidence that exists about climate change, and we've got to show them that the scientific evidence is strong.
This was what one so-called climate skeptic had to say in response to that.
I think that is one of the most disgraceful statements from a Prime Minister I have ever heard, and I'll be quite blunt about it. And I think, actually, even many scientists who support global warming would agree with me on that. Science does not function by consensus, and most certainly not by politically driven consensus. In fact, the history of consensus in science is terrible. From Galileo right the way through the beginning of the 20th century, when 95% of scientists, for goodness sake, believed in eugenics. Science has to, by its very nature, be skeptical.
Mr. Godfrey Bloom, 1 minute.
Mr. President, I take the opportunity of wishing the East European cities well in the coming of the very early skiing season, and snow and ice that's come there, what of course is indicative of the fact that, as independent science has now confirmed, that the globe is actually cooling and has been cooling since 2002, broadly flat since 1998. We're all talking about something here which isn't happening. I've heard time and time again members here talk of CO2 as a pollutant. A pollutant is a life-giving natural gas. It gives me the impression that some of our members haven't had the benefit of a formal education. Isn't this really just about the state being able to get its hand in ordinary people's trouser pocket to steal yet more tax from them? Isn't this all about political control? Isn't all this about politics and big business? The whole thing's a sham. This bogus hypothesis, this ridiculous nonsense that man-made CO2 is causing global warming. Enough, please, before we damage irrevocably the global economy.
It's past the point of talking. We know historically that the global governance the sort of agenda to these issues is very hard to try and with all the best intentions, it's very hard to actually activate. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing a lot of fragmentation going on in Copenhagen, a lot of different agendas pulling in different directions. And I think what we really need to see is people on the ground starting to actually act upon the low-hanging fruit and start to try and move on the solutions that we have at hand. It's past the point of talking. We know historically that the global governance sort of agenda to these issues is very hard to try and, with all the best intentions, it's very hard to actually activate. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing a lot of fragmentation going on in Copenhagen, a lot of different agendas pulling in different directions. And I think what we really need to see is people on the ground starting to actually act upon the low-hanging fruit and start to try and move on the solutions that we have at hand.
Rosji, 1 minuta. Przepraszam, kolega Gnriffin.
Mr. Gnriffin for 2 minutes.
Everyone agrees that climate change is the biggest challenge facing humanity. That's the constant claim of the political elite, and it's a lie. Everyone does not agree. Thousands of scientists dispute the very existence of man-made global warming, citing natural cyclical changes that saw vineyards in Roman northern England and a Swedish army march over the frozen Baltic in 1658 to Copenhagen. As an army of global warming zealots marches to Copenhagen, the truth is that their Orwellian consensus is based not on scientific agreement but on bullying, censorship and fraudulent statistics. In the words of leading climatologist Professor Lindzen, future generations will wonder in bemused amazement that the early 21st century's developed world went into hysterical panic over a globally average temperature increase of a few tenths of a degree, and on the basis of gross exaggerations of highly uncertain computer projections contemplated a rollback of the industrial age. In fact, there will be no bemused amazement, for the reason for this hysteria is clear. It is designed to provide the excuse for a political project of the globalists to replace national democracy with New World Order global governance. It has nothing to do with science and everything to do with a globalist common purpose to tax and control us while making billions for corporations in the green industrial complex. The anti-Western intellectual cranks of the left suffered a collective breakdown when communism collapsed. Climate change is their new theology, a secular religious hysteria complete with Pope Al Gore, carbon credit indulgences and the persecution of heretics. But the heretics will have a voice in Copenhagen and the truth will out. Climate change is being used to impose an anti-human utopia as deadly as anything conceived by Stalin or Mao.
Thank you, colleague. The next...
Mr. Bloom, for 1.5 minutes, please.
Well, Mr. President, of course, you can tell I'm a scarecrow because I don't dress like a scarecrow. I fought my way through the blizzard in Copenhagen, like many of you did. Interesting, isn't it, that we've had the coldest winter so far on record in London for 30 years. It's the same in Poland, it's the same in Korea, it's the same in China. We've had the coldest temperatures in Florida, Arizona, Texas, the first snow in Texas, I think, for 100 years. And of course, as Charles Corrin of the London Times said, my goodness me, and we simply don't get it, of course, that's what global warming is all about. We've got to get used to freezing temperatures. Well, we've seen the Al Gore hockey stick, which is still, I gather, being shown in London state schools. Al Gore, snake oil salesman, crook. We've seen Professor Jones from the East Anglia University, crook. And now, you won't know about this yet because it's been kept out of the public domain, the New Zealand National Climate Database, and I had the figures here, all fraudulent. When are you all going to wake up? Scam, scam, scam.
Señor Bloom,